So I've been testing the base 1599 M3 14-inch MacBook Pro for a while now. Wow, that's a mouthful, but anyways, for those wondering if this is worth buying, even with 8 gigs of RAM, here are my thoughts. So this MacBook is pretty easy for me to review because it's essentially the same Mac they've been selling for the last 2 years, with some minor changes. Beginning with the design, this still feels like peak MacBook design to me. I really can't fault anything with the hardware, and yes, I know people are gonna complain about the humongous notch, but it's a non-issue in my opinion. I usually forget it's there, and so I truly believe this design is perfect. This form factor especially offers the best balance, where it's portable enough but also gives you some serious real estate with that 14.2-inch display. And by the way, would like to remind you guys, like this video and subscribe for more content like this, it would be appreciated. Coming from the M1 MacBook Air, the slightly larger display does make a difference. Also, fun fact, the M3 model is ever so slightly lighter than its higher end counterparts, so you pay less and you get less, which I guess makes sense. Also, I know this doesn't get the fancy new space black option that everyone's going gaga for, but honestly guys, unpopular opinion, I think it's a tad overrated. I'm glad we have a new color option, but I've always thought silver is the best color for new Macs in general. It's the classic option and always looks great, so I would go with that shade on the 14-inch. Now yes, I'm aware the 14-inch M3 loses one port on the right side, and it's only Thunderbolt 3 ports instead of Thunderbolt 4 like the other MacBook Pros, but the target demographic for this machine likely won't care about this. Yes, Apple calls this the MacBook Pro, but let's be honest, students and those who just want a fancier MacBook Air are mainly getting this, and so they likely won't care about these emissions. I certainly didn't. Thunderbolt 3 ports are still plenty good, and 2 USB-C ports are not limiting at all, especially since you have MagSafe here, so when charging, those 2 ports are free for peripherals. Plus, you get the same great SD card reader and HDMI ports like the other models, which can be useful. Now, because it does support Thunderbolt 3 and it's only the regular M3, this base model only supports one display up to 6K resolution at 60Hz, or one display with up to 4K resolution at 120Hz over HDMI. Now, am I outraged by this? No, not really, because it's not a massive deal breaker. If you have multiple displays, you're loaded, you have a ton of cash, so go ahead and buy an M3 Pro instead. Why are you buying the base MacBook Pro? Because this is not made for you. Moving on to performance, in this machine we have the base M3. It's got 8 CPU cores with a split of 4 performance and 4 efficiency cores, and also 10 GPU cores. And there's not much for me to say here because, surprise surprise, Apple Silicon is still awesome. I have been using an M1 MacBook Air for the last 3 years, and I've yet to have any performance issues with that machine, and so M3 here flies through anything I throw at it. Obviously, I've been mainly editing videos, it's regular 4K footage, I don't do many fancy edits, but I'm probably pushing this machine a lot harder than most consumers since I'm editing videos every single day on it, and there's been no slowdowns. I also surprisingly don't hear the fan very often inside, so yes, on the whole, performance is fantastic on this, and if you care about the fancy numbers, here are some Geekbench scores. It's all very impressive. I'm very happy with the performance. By the way, I don't ever play games on my Mac, so I haven't been able to test hardware ray tracing with the M3, but hey, I'll take the upgrade at the end of the day, especially if it does help improve the gaming landscape for macOS, so that others can play games more easily on this machine. So let's now address the major Achilles heel with this MacBook, and it's the one thing that stops it from being absolute perfection, which is 8 gigs of RAM. Now, I won't lie to you guys, I didn't really pick up on this Mac slowing down because it did not have enough memory, since unified memory in Apple Silicon is generally great. However, I don't think this will always be the case. You see, as the machine gets older and it becomes more taxing for this machine to run new versions of applications, I am very sure 8 gigs of RAM is going to start to become a bit of an issue. And so while I think it's fine for most right now, I still think they should have given us 12 gigs of RAM as standards, just to future-proof the machine. And yes, you can pay the extra for the 16 gig upgrades, but because Apple charges an arm and a leg quite literally for a stick of RAM, the machine now becomes $17.99, which is very close in price to a 14-inch M3 Pro MacBook. And so that's why I'm solely reviewing the base model, because this is the one most are going to buy anyways, and ultimately, yes, you can get away with 8 gigs, but I still worry about how it's gonna age. The RAM is soldered as well, so you can't upgrade this down the line, so I'm still a little mixed on this. Honestly, I think most consumers can make do with 256 gigs of storage, and they should have given us 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage as the base configuration, especially since you can rely on external storage instead. And that's basically it for the changes with this machine. Everything else is very similar to older MacBooks, which isn't a bad thing because the M1 Pro and M2 Pro MacBooks were fantastic, and everything that was great about them applies to this machine as well. So for example, let's begin with the display. This is easily one of, if not the best display on a laptop right now. It blows my mind that Apple gave this base 14-inch the exact same display as its higher-end counterparts, but I appreciate the mini LED colors pop and the blacks are truly black. I also appreciate the high brightness. I don't really care about it being 120Hz, but it's nice to have, and I think this will be the big reason a lot of consumers go for this machine over the MacBook Air, because if you watch a lot of movies and TV shows, this display is perfect for that. Moving to the webcam, I'll be honest, I feel like many gas up the webcam on these new Macs, but I actually can't tell much of a difference between the 1080p FaceTime camera on this and the 720p FaceTime camera on the M1 Air. Both are just fine, and at the end of the day, it's a small sensor tucked behind the screen, so I would suggest using your iPhone via continuity camera instead. The quality your iPhone produces will be miles ahead. The speakers on this absolutely blew my mind. They sound insane, and I just can't comprehend how such a small machine has speakers that are this good. Again, this is a big reason to get the MacBook Pro over the Air. The mics are also crystal clear for calls, and here's a sample for you guys. And here's a webcam and mic test for you guys on this MacBook. Let me know how this sounds. The keyboard is also fantastic and the trackpad is perfection. It's nice and large, and every time I use a Mac I come to appreciate how incredible Apple's trackpads are, because when I used to use Windows laptops, that was the one thing that sucked consistently on all of them, and it seems Apple really is the only one who can nail this part of the laptop experience. Touch ID has also been reliable, however I am praying that Apple gives us Face ID one day on the Macs, because just opening the lid and the machine instantly recognizing me would be so convenient, and with the notch up at the top I'm sure Apple could squeeze in some new sensors to give us this technology. In fact, Face ID makes more sense here compared to the iPhone and iPads, and could be Apple's answer to Windows Hello, so I'm hoping this is in the works. Connectivity wise, you get Wi-Fi 6E, not Wi-Fi 7, and Bluetooth 5.3 support, but I've frankly had no issues in this department. It's been rock solid. The battery life frankly has been bonkers. This actually offers similar battery life to the 16-inch, and I've noticed I only drop around 9% of battery life once I finish editing videos for 2 hours. That's insane. It blows my mind how efficient Apple Silicon is. Back when I was using an Intel MacBook Pro, I would be close to dead by the time I finish editing, so yes, this is easily the best thing about Apple Silicon Macs. They last forever, guys. So those are my thoughts on the new 14-inch M3 MacBook, and at the end of the day, guys, I really have nothing to complain about. This is a tried and tested chassis. We've already had 2 great generations of MacBook Pro that are based on this, and so I'm glad this design has become more accessible. The base M3 is plenty fine for 90% of consumers, and it's pretty awesome. You can now get better speakers and also the mini LED display for less. But, and there is a but, I would wait for this to get cheaper, because if you're paying this much, you should not be settling for 8 gigs of RAM. You should ideally future-proof the machine, and well, by the time you upgrade the RAM, this is not as great value anymore. So yes, while supplies last, I would right now recommend getting the M2 Pro refurbished, because you can get 16 gigs of RAM on that, and also the additional port for less. However, that's not always going to be available, and so I'm very sure waiting a little will be worth it. And when this eventually drops to $13.99 or even $12.99 via third parties, I think you can then look past the fact it comes with 8 gigs of RAM. That would basically put it in line with the old 13-inch MacBook Pro's price. And so if you're not in a rush, guys, trust me, the wait's going to be worth it, because spending retail price and getting 8 gigs of RAM is really not worth it. Even if you don't trust third-party sellers, the Apple Refurb store should have M3 models in a few months, and so I still advise to wait. Plus, I'm sure many students are going to buy this, and if you can wait, you can take advantage of Apple's back to school deal in the future. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.